Welcome to episode 6 of the Filmumentaries podcast. Number 6. Didn't think I'd get this far. My aim is to keep going up to 10 and see where we're at. And I really do appreciate all of your comments and your feedback. To those that have left those comments and feedback, I'm very grateful that you've taken the time to do that. Even if it isn't a good review, if you want to give me some criticism, constructive would be preferred. Please do. I'm ready to hear some of that as well. This week, I'm talking to Dan Lanigan, who is a props collector. He has been collecting movie props for a number of years and has some amazing items in his collection, which we'll talk about in the interview. Dan and I have become friends ever since he and his business partner, Jason Henry, a TV director, they both tracked me down via my filmumentaries.com website, having seen some of my work. Back then, they were in pre-production on a show that they were developing about movie props, and they'd seen some of my work, and they thought maybe I could help them in some way. And I did end up being a consultant on that show for a month or so. I did end up with a little trip out to Los Angeles and stayed in Burbank and got to meet Dan and Jason and the team. And it was an interesting time because we were working on some research for some episodes that they were hoping to do at that point. Some of which, hopefully, if they get a second series, will be in there. So I hope you enjoy my chat with Dan, and I'll be back, as usual, with a little bit of jabbering at the end. So Dan, you're a big movie props collector. What was the point where you first looked at a movie and said, I want to have that, and what was that?
Oh, Jamie, That's a tough one. I think when I was a kid, playing with the AT-AT toys, the Kenner AT-AT toys, made me obsess about those pieces, those stop motion puppets. And it wasn't until I was older that I realized, the AT-ATs were stop motion and they were real. I would say that's probably, without knowing it, the first piece that I really wanted. And I think it'll probably be certainly a piece that I never acquire. Those are locked up tight in the Lucasfilm vaults, rightfully so, and being protected. And but yeah, I mean, that's kind of the AT-ATs were just so cool. The Imperial Walkers, the all-terrain armored transports, whatever you want to call them. Such a cool piece of engineering. Looks like an animal, looks like a machine, looks like a crane, which I've got a history of working with cranes, and so does my family. It's, remind me of the way an elephant walks. I'm obsessed with elephants. It's kind of bringing everything together. Stop motion. It just, Phil Tippett, it was the stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's something amazing about those designs of those ships and characters in those original movies that I still do it now. Like, I see them around. I see those shapes around. Like you're talking about the lifts for the containers, yep. Right? Mm-hmm. So I was in Korea a few years ago, and we went across this huge bridge, and you just saw in the distance all these cranes lined up. And me and my mate Christian, who are both Star Wars nuts, just went, "There's a load of AT-ATs over there." Because what was clever about those designs is they drew from things that were all around us, so they always look familiar. And I don't know about you, but it feels like those things have always existed in my life. I can't.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Them.
I agree with that. And the thing about it is, what's great about the design work from the original Star Wars films is because of, yes, these are science fiction ships and vehicles, and I guess you call the AT-AT a vehicle. It's kind of a walking robot vehicle, but because of the wear and the way it's designed, it feels like a real thing. And based on that, and I think there was some design similarities, or at least some influence from the gantry cranes that you see in the ports. A funny story is when I was younger, when Empire Strikes Back came out, my company that my father started many years ago, MyJack Products, we built these giant industrial cranes called travel lifts. And we had one that was being erected at a rail yard, being put up at a rail yard. And when Empire Strikes Back came out, and everybody would call it the Imperial Walker, and they actually put Imperial Walker on the top of the crane at the time. So it's, there's this kind of back and forth. Art, reality inspires art, and then art inspires reality. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. What is it about props what do they do for you that just watching the movie doesn't do? What is it about a prop that you need to have it and need to hold it?
By having a piece of the film, a prop that's used in the film that's connected to the history of the film, it helps you connect to the film even deeper. You know, a prop without seeing the film, it doesn't give you that much. I mean, it might be a great piece of artwork, and a lot of these pieces are really beautiful pieces of artwork, but it's until you understand the story of the narrative that's being told on the film, and then you see this iconography of these pieces, and then you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then you connect to it. And then by connecting to it, you learn more about how it was made. And then you're connecting to the film even more. So it just helps you connect to these amazing films in ways that, you know, it's like the adult version of when you would play with toys when you were a kid. You're not playing with these props, but it allows you to live in that world closer in a more adult way, in the ways similar to but different to the people that worked on the film.
Yeah, I can see that entirely. I mean, I've been to a few exhibitions over the years, and just sharing the same space with some of those props and those costumes really gives you a buzz. And you know, the other thing that I'm always amazed about is the level of detail that is on a lot of these props that we're talking about. You know, you see them on film and you understand they exist within that frame for that time, and they were built just for that, right? They
most of the time, right?
Last.
Yeah.
But having seen some of those things close up, it's incredible that they would steal, particularly those ILM guys would take from Tamiya models and off-the-shelf models of tanks and ships and combine all these little tiny details. Yeah,
I've always been blown such, away. Yeah.
It's just incredible stuff.
Well, from a technical standpoint, you never know how close the director is going to want to shoot the piece, whether it's a model, whether it's a hand prop, whether it's a costume. But even if that's not the case, if the artists that are building these pieces have their wherewithal, they're going to want to make them look as good as possible because it's their artwork, it's their art form, you know. And and the only time, at least when you're making a movie, you don't know if it's going to be successful. It's the only time people are going to see it. Now, Star Wars is, you know, I wouldn't say an exception. Maybe it's an exception how successful it is, but when these prop makers are building these pieces, you know, this is, you know, to make it is better to make the piece as interesting as possible, so perhaps it will get more screen time, and then people will be able to appreciate their artwork. And that's part of what makes these props so amazing, is because there's so much more detail that the camera doesn't even see.
Yeah, I always think of those scenes in some of the those moments in some of the old behind the scenes documentaries, particularly on the Star Wars movies, where you've kind of got George Lucas walking in, checking out all of the little maquettes of the designs that Phil Tippett have come up with, and you know, he might even put like a stamp on a drawing to say good, bad, or
I remember that, right?
And they're trying to impress the director,
of course.
Right? So they're trying to make it as detailed as possible, and hopefully they get their little moment in the limelight.
That's right. That's right.
But how much of what you do as a prop collector is in the hunt for you? You must enjoy the hunt, looking for those props and trying to track them down? Yes,
the hunt is a ton of fun. And it's also a major headache, but that's what makes it so much fun. You know, it's certainly not the same, but it has a similar feel to, you know, an archaeologist digging through the sand, you know, Indiana Jones-esque. Certainly it's not nearly as dangerous and not nearly as exciting, but it's fun to... As part of the process of hunting, you get to meet some really interesting people in the research you're doing, both collectors and people that work on the films. And, you know, the community behind the props, there's a lot of really great people, both behind the camera and, you know, in the collecting circles. There's also some bad guys out there, but mostly it's good people.
That's a good point, because a lot of people often think of prop collecting as purely a transactional thing, but it's about the environment, it's about the people, it's about the world that you're immersing yourself in, and, you know, getting pleasure out of that. I mean, I've just looked through the prop store catalogue this evening.
Oh, it's amazing, isn't it?
There's some incredible items on there. Yes. And I've sent several messages out to friends saying, you know, shall we go, like, halves or fifths on something, just anything, and I'll have it for 2020. You can have it for 2021.
That's a good way to acquire a piece, but not a great way to keep friends.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What we've not mentioned is that you recently had a Disney Plus show called Prop Culture that you worked on and presented and used your expertise on. It was a great series, and if anyone has not seen it, I absolutely recommend it. We got Disney Plus just for that reason.
I hope you think it's a great series, Jamie. You worked on it.
Well, yeah. Well, this is how we met,
yes.
isn't it? So Dan and the director of the show, Jason, approached me a couple of Decembers ago,
yes.
just out of the blue via my website, and
because we were fans of your Filmumentaries.
Yeah. Well, again, that's always blows me away that there are fans, which is great. And you sort of had seen what I'd done and the kind of
Absolutely.
deep dive that I do, and thought maybe this guy might be useful.
Yeah, no, you were. It was great. We reached out to you and wanted to see if you were interested in helping us dig up, some background information and certainly some of the amazing footage that you had been archiving for years on a number of different projects. And you helped us on that part, and then we became friends, and now we're trying to develop a few things on our own. So who knows what that future is going to lead to, but, I love working with like-minded people and people that are smart. I wouldn't say I'm smart, but I certainly like to work with people that are smarter than me, but that also like the same stuff. And I definitely feel that's the case with you, Jamie.
Well, I appreciate that. It's the same. It feels the same for me, but the other way around. But I always... I'm always gratified by people that find my stuff kind of organically, as it were, and have come across it and enjoyed it, because I made it for me, really, and I made it for people like me, if they exist out there, and you put your thing out there and you hope that people are going to enjoy it. And your Prop Culture series, I thought it was a great success. What it did was it reminded us of those things that we talked about a moment ago, making that connection to a prop and being... more immersed into it. But in the show, of course, you reunite people with some of the iconic props and items that they, maybe as a childhood star, for instance, or, 40 years ago, 50, 60 years ago even, were handling back then. And it does have this emotional resonance for people, doesn't it?
It does. And, as a collector and as someone who has, met some folks that have worked on these films in my research in the past for my own collection and for pieces that I've picked up, you get a sense that these artifacts from these projects that these people worked on are generally important. Not always, but if the film is successful and it's a good memory for the people, they will connect with it, and the further back it goes, the more likely they haven't seen it. So we were able to get some really interesting pieces connected with some people who worked on the films, and it was great moments to be there in the room with and to be able to record. I think we had a lot of really fun shoots because these people are interesting and they're real humans, and that's what watching movies is about, is living the world. And when you work on a film and then you go back to it many years later, it's tough working on a movie, but you forget all the hard times, you remember the good times. And by bringing these pieces and connecting them with them, I think that just helped bring that out.
A particularly emotional one with Karen, who worked on Mary Poppins.
Karen Dotrice. Yes, Mary Poppins.
And you reintroduced her to her little outfit and everything, and just seeing that genuine reaction on her face, it was really emotional. Me and my wife were kind of choking up, and it's...
I was too, actually. Well, think about it from Karen's perspective. She was a little girl when this movie was made. And ever since, Mary, you're the little girl from Mary Poppins. It's an amazing film. So to go see the jacket that she wore when she was a child in this huge film that changed her life, and then reconnect it with a hat that she was gifted by a friend of hers that was in the film as well, it was a pretty special moment.
Yeah, it really was. And there are other, there were movies in the series that I thought, oh, is that really that interesting? I'm not sure if I'm going to like this episode, but every single episode, every single time, there was an emotional reaction to it. Like even what was the episode? I didn't think that Narnia was going to interest me, and then I
Right,
watched it with
right.
my kids. The first time I watched it with my kids, and of course they're of that generation that loved that movie. Probably they were a little bit young when it first came out, but they found it on DVD and things. And they were absolutely blown away that that stuff still exists and people had kept it and it was in such good condition, and the reaction of the cast to it. And I think, whatever film the prop is from, whatever film floats your boat, it's always going to have a connection somewhere, isn't it, to somebody? Because, part of the reason I did the Filmumentaries was because I also always wanted to tell the stories of not just the main players, the director, the actor. I wanted to talk to everybody and find all those little stories that wouldn't necessarily come out. And I think your show does a really good job of reminding us of that human connection and that that endeavor to make something special.
Yeah, it's interesting. That bit, that kernel of information, that idea that you had that you used for your Filmumentaries is actually one of the motivating ideas I had for pop culture. The original idea was to lean more into the folks that built everything than the actors, and ultimately I think we found a good balance of the people who are in front of the camera and the people who are behind the camera. But that's, I want to celebrate the Tom St. Amonts, the Charlie Crowells, the people that you don't necessarily know their names, but you certainly know what they've done by these amazing films. And because those are the people that I've interacted with, as I imagine you have in making these things, and they're just wonderful folks, and they're real people. And they need to get a little bit more love, So in success, it's great that this show is able to do that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm sitting here talking to Dan, and behind him on the shelves, I see, it's strewn with props and items from movies I love. But you own some really cool, interesting props. What have you got a particular favorite, Dan, that you really hold in high regard?
There's a lot of pieces in my collection that are important to me, and I collect mainly because of what moves me emotionally and intellectually and creatively from a film perspective. But probably the top piece is probably the Blade Runner blaster that I have. Which was the hero from Blade Runner that Harrison Ford, who played Rick Deckard, held and used for most of the film. That film has always been very important to me in many different levels, and it's just kind of one of those pieces that just reminds you of why you love film, and it's got a great mystery behind it of who built it and what happened to it, and just. There's just so many different things. But I mean, I love Indiana Jones films. I love the Raiders films, minus the bad dream of the fourth one in most cases. I'm not a huge fan of the last one. But Empire Strikes Back I love. I don't collect on Star Wars just because it's such a crazy market. But, stop motion, Nightmare Before Christmas is big for me. It's just all of these amazing, cool stuff. Eventually, hopefully, Marvel will start selling some stuff because I love Thor. I've always been a fan of the character, so I would love to get some of the stuff from that film. It's just most collectors will collect from the heart. There are some collectors out there that do it mainly for the financial investments. You do need to think about that when you collect, especially nowadays because things are so expensive. You have to buy it as if you can turn around and sell it. But at the same time, that's not what drives me.
And what do you think about the replica side of things? Because obviously not everybody has the opportunity to own an original prop, but there are now licensed replicas and things like that. What's your feeling on those?
They're great. I think they are a way to share that wonderful feeling and connection to the film, so that more people can access it. The problem with screen use props is, there's not many made for these films. I got into it early enough that I could kind of get connected to it. I actually have replicas, and Lord of the Rings replicas. I've got some Star Wars replicas. I think they're really interesting. From a prop collector who collects originals, replicas can cause problems with authentication because sometimes people will take a replica and modify it and then sell it as an original. So, there's some deviousness going on with that. That's completely separate from the fact that I think replicas are good for fandom and have helped build up this cosplay world. I think it's great. It's a great way to kind of feel connected to these films. And there's some great artists and great companies doing some really cool replicas of some really great pieces.
Yeah. I mean, I've thought about it often, just getting a few, and the AT-AT being one of them actually, because it's one of my favorite designs.
Yeah, the master replicas. They did two of them, and I've got a couple of both. If the next deal we're doing works out on the side, I'll send you it. I'll send you one of them. I've got a couple of them. The reason I have a couple of them, I'll tell you, they're big. The reason I have a couple of them is I had this idea 15 years ago. I was doing still photography at the time, and I wanted to build a photo diorama of the Battle of Hoth. So I bought a couple of these master replica AT-ATs. I did some different scale ones. Now I've got multiples. I can't let them go, but I'd be happy to send you one if our little business venture happens.
Well, you do know I'm recording this, don't you?
I know.
I'm going to hold you to that.
I expect you to. You to.
I appreciate it. It's interesting, though, the whole idea of preserving these props. Because, part of another reason that I did my Filmumentaries was because when my grandfather passed away, he was a great storyteller, my grandfather. When he passed away, all of his stories were kind of gone, and we're trying to get them from memory, and no, there was this, and we couldn't remember the details. And I got into the idea of speaking to these people that worked on these films that I loved in some way to create an archive to make sure that future generations could hear these stories. And in the same way, props can be viewed in that way, can't it? And how much...
Oh, absolutely.
The storage process is important. I mean, it's a huge issue, right? Because some of this stuff, as I said, wasn't designed to last. Depending on what it's made of, it can just disintegrate, can't it?
It can. Well, the thing about it's interesting about props is, if you look at it from a fine art perspective, the more you know about the piece, how it was made, who made it, all of that information, it helps you verify its provenance. And that information is important moving forward for the history of filmmaking because, if you talk to somebody who built the prop, not only will they be able to tell you the technical stuff of how they did it and what influenced them creatively, but you can also find out how they used it on set, and that's also connected to filmmaking history. So it's all really important, in my opinion, and all kind of connected to the same kind of things that you're doing in Filmumentaries, just from a different angle, a different perspective. But at the same time, a lot of these pieces that are made with the best materials to get the shot, and not necessarily the best materials for these props to last for many years down the road. A lot of the materials will dry up, will start to crumble to dust. Some of them will start to goop. Certain silicones will actually start to weep and goop up. There's certain cloths will dry up and start. There's all different types of issues you have to do to protect this stuff because, again, this stuff is not designed to last forever. It's designed to last until the movie's finished. So that is a challenge, and you're learning as you go. So it's been interesting. I wouldn't say it's been fun, but it's been interesting figuring these challenges out to preserve these pieces.
Yeah, and would you have based your decision to purchase or not purchase something on the material it was made of? I mean, that must come into consideration, right? Or
yes.
I suppose it really depends, doesn't it, if you really, really want that item?
Well, yes. I mean... there is. It depends on the condition it's in now and what you think you can do to keep it from getting any worse. Certain polyurethanes turn to liquid. That's a problem with some of the Nightmare Before Christmas stuff that I collect. But then there's also silicone masks, things from the film The Fifth Element and Star Wars Episode 1. And like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, they all use this type of silicone which was new in the industry at the time, with these plasticizers. There's some sort of plasticizers they would put into it, and it made the silicone nice and soft and made it look fleshy. But within 6 months to a year, it would start to weep, and then the paint would slide off, and it just became just mush. I've turned down pieces made of that material because as much as I want it, like there's this Zapbox Brebelbrox head from Hitchhiker's Guide, which the film with Sam Rockwell and Martin Freeman. Yeah. And there was a Zapbox Brebelbrox head that was like his double head, his head on top of another head, because the character has two heads, and he had two brains, and one of them, or half of a brain gets cut off, whatever. So the piece had already started to sweat, and that I knew was like, well, it's going to go to hell really quickly, and I didn't buy it because it was a couple grand, and I'm not going to spend that kind of money. As much as I want to preserve the piece, there's nothing I can do to preserve it. There's some foam latexes that are in like the Star Wars masks and some of the older stuff actually can be preserved now. There's ways of doing it, but nobody's figured out how to preserve the silicone.
Yeah. Have you ever thought then about displaying your stuff? Having a museum of some sort or a place where people could visit your items?
It's always on my mind. I have from a very long time ago. I've wanted to take the pieces that I've been amassing and put them in a space that the like-minded fans can go and see it. It's just a very difficult proposition to figure out so that it doesn't, it's a very expensive process. That's why usually governments create museums. But my hope is at some point my pieces will wind up in a museum, even if it's not one of mine. If I'm not able to start one, I would love to get my collection into a museum so people can see it. But the first step is to try and do a traveling exhibit, which I'm working on for a bunch of robots that I've collected. I've got an idea for a robot exhibition that I'm gonna put on.
Oh, nice, very cool. Yeah, because I'm sure I read somewhere many years ago, a few years back, that two big Hollywood peeps, I think it was a director and an actor, got together to buy the Judy Garland ruby slippers and donate them to the Museum of Motion Arts or whatever it is. Because I think, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about initially, which is about that kind of cultural heritage that needs to be preserved. I mean, they were just a pair of shoes of maybe 5 or 6 pairs or whatever it was, just for that for that film, never designed to last. And then they can end up being worth, to somebody, $3 million or whatever it was it went for. But, that film still lives on, doesn't it? I mean, there'll be people... There won't be many people still around that worked on that movie or starred in that movie. Well, it will be the Munchkin kids if they're still around, I guess, will it? But
yeah, I think there's very few people that worked on that film that are still alive.
But then we've still got some of these items, which is great. And I think, it really is important to make sure that, we can see these things in person. And I've always travelled to these exhibitions when I can. I went to the Stanley Kubrick exhibition at the Design Museum in the UK last year, which was fantastic. I went to the Star Wars one in Greenwich here in the UK at the O2, and I always try and go and visit these things in person, just because for me that's the way I'm gonna get a connection to them.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. I mean, it's great to see photos of these exhibitions, but seeing it with your own eyes, in stereo where you can kind of smell it, and you can kind of get a sense of with the color, the lighting, and how it really interacts in the space. It's the best way to see it if you can. And that's another, I'm a prop collector. I love seeing this stuff in person, and that's part of the drive. Small part, but it's a part of the drive.
Is part of the film industry now geared up for the props industry, would you say? I mean, it was the case that as we said, these things were built, they were made, they weren't made to last, and they ended up in, a technician's garage or, in the attic, or we've all heard those stories of things being found and uncovered. But now surely there must be big business involved, right?
Yes, I think it depends on the company and the brand. The more money a company spends on a film, the more aware they're going to be of the assets that are coming from it, especially if it's a Star Wars or a Marvel or a DC. They're going to track that stuff because it's important and they do know the aftermarket value. I would say how they're making the pieces aren't necessarily made any more archival because of that. I would think they're still going to try and make them the best for the film because ultimately that's the purpose for making these pieces. But, they might make more and they might make special versions based on the ones that are used in the film for archival purposes or, for exhibition and things like that. But yeah, it's the bigger companies are very aware of the importance of it. I mean, the Walt Disney Company has their own archive. Warner Brothers has their own archive. They're keeping stuff nowadays. They still sell things occasionally and they throw a lot away, but they do have their own archives and there's a reason for that because they know it's culturally important and to a certain degree financially important.
Yeah, because you talk about someone like Disney who, gave away the bag from Mary Poppins as a competition prize. I mean, it was a very different time, wasn't it? Back then, there's the awareness of
very
how
different
important these things were going to be was not really fully realised. One thing that was always interested me about prop collectors is, I'm sure each one of them has got their own little kind of guilty pleasure, maybe we could call it. Like, is there a film that you love that isn't, it isn't one of the Star Wars or the Indiana Jones or the Tim Burton films, or is there one that's kind of way out?
Oh yes, yes. I mean, and usually those are the films that it's very difficult to find pieces from. There's two films that I love that most people are either say, "What is that?" or "No way," that I can't find pretty much anything from. The first one is Strange Brew, which is a comedy based on SCTV characters Bob, the McKenzie brothers, Bob and Doug McKenzie, by Rick Moranis and Dave Thomas. Yeah. I can't find anything from that film. The other one is Ishtar, which was a huge flop back in the late 80s with Dustin Hoffman and Warren Beatty, and that's also a film that you can't find anything from. Anything that was kept from that film was probably put back into circulation for other prop and wardrobe shops, and the rest of it would have been destroyed. So, it's only the successful films or the films that have really unique stuff that gets kept. And the more unique it is, the more likely it's not going to get reused because it's too identifiable for good or for bad.
It's a shame, isn't it, that those props weren't hung on to, because, somebody's going to love those films regardless of whether they were a box office flop or not.
But, they might have been held on to, but nobody thought it was important. It's in the bottom of somebody's, box in their garage, for all you know. And it's certainly not making money in auctions.
Yeah, but that must be quite a tantalising idea for a prop collector like you, that there's still things out there in drawers and, in basements and in attics.
Yeah. I mean, there's always that opportunity. And that is the archaeology aspect of this is kind of like archaeology in our own culture, trying to dig into things that may have been forgotten or lost, and that connects with, other people that collect antiques or collect comic books or baseball cards or, those kind of things.
And unlike antiques, you're at least able, with your expertise, to do screen matching as well. Now, this is a big thing, isn't it? Making sure that little detail that you can see on this model in front of me matches the detail of that model there or that prop there. It's really important to know that you've got the genuine item in front of you.
It is. The problem with prop collecting is there's so many different artistic disciplines that are involved in making these things when it comes to, engineers and metallurgy and sculptors and costume designers and all different types of material that they're working with, and trying to authenticate these things can be very difficult. But the benefit of them coming from a film is, generally speaking, you should be able to look at the movie and try and compare it. Now, that works only so well depending on the resolution of the shot that you're trying to compare it to, and how clear it is. But it also works against you if you're trying to confirm if something is a fake, because the people that are making the fakes are the ones that are looking at that information as well. So it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. And I guess it's a double-edged sword having big companies like the Prop Store curating all of this stuff, because, all right, it's great that they're able to find, that this is that genuine item, but at the same time, it's going through their funnel, which of course is going to add a bit of money to the price. And it takes away from that opportunity of you chancing across something, doing your own research, I guess.
Well, yes. I mean, I suppose that's true, but it also allows folks that don't have the wherewithal or the ability to track these pieces down that you would probably never see if it wasn't for experts like them doing it. So I would agree. As a collector who is fairly active in trying to find stuff myself, companies like Profiles and Prop Store and these other dealers you can bump up against them, but then there's a lot of times where you're finding stuff that they've tracked down that of course you got to confirm yourself as original and real. Mm-hmm. Some of the dealers are more into doing their research than others. I've found Prop Store is generally very good. They seem to spend a lot of time. They do make mistakes, but I feel pretty comfortable with the stuff coming from them. But you got to do your own research. And especially if you're spending a lot of money, you got to do your own research. Because ultimately, it's buyer beware.
Yeah, one of the things I've come across interviewing people over the years is that they have these items and they don't necessarily see the value in them, particularly if it's a script or a storyboard. It might even be a photocopied, a folder full of photocopied storyboards. But because they were used by somebody who was on the crew of that film, whatever that film is, of course it's going to be valuable to somebody. There's two individuals I can think of in particular that I know have, or one of them's passed away now, but that had items that they just said, nobody's going to be interested in this. I sold all the good stuff. But they've got things, like a script with annotations from the famous director or drawings on it from the famous director. And I think there is a disbelief sometimes because these people were just doing their job and they don't understand that, you look at that 2001 spacesuit that went recently, fantastic item.
Yeah.
And it went for 370,000 or something.
Do you think that was a lot?
Well, it seems a lot to me.
I will say it's a lot of money. Absolutely a ton of money. My expectation was that it was going to go for $500,000
really?
At least. I think if it was, because I do think if the piece was repainted at one point during production, if it still looked like one of the main characters' spacesuits, which it used to, and had the original chest piece, it would have gone for twice as much, if not more. It's just the visual perception of what it's worth. Historically, it's super important too, but it's not. It's a lot of things. When a 2001 spacesuit, which is arguably more important than something from the original Star Wars, comes up and doesn't sell for as much because it's not as shiny. I don't know. There's lots of reasons why things go for so much money. I would have bet money that would have gone for more than that. So I was very surprised.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about it as a absolute cornerstone of science fiction movie making. Yeah, I mean, it is a very, very valuable prop in that regard, and it's very difficult to put a value on it. And I guess a lot of the value comes from the people that want it. Right, that's kind of sets the value to a certain extent. That's only where the value comes from. It's the people that want it and how much money they're willing to spend on it to put it in their collection or in their museum or whatnot. So, and the thing about it is, the Academy. Let's say the Academy won that spacesuit, which is a great piece.
They probably would have been willing to go for, I don't want. I'm. This is a guess by my part, but I would guess that they would have spent at least twice as much. But there wasn't someone else willing to push it up to that point.
Yeah.
It's supply and demand, and one of the reasons some of these props go for so much money is they're very iconic pieces and they're one of a kinds, and a lot of people want them. So
yeah, definitely.
But yeah, that's the craziness of prop collecting. That what you don't really get in replica collecting, which is so much better because you don't have to worry about it being, maybe there's 200 of them or 500 or 1,000, but it's still not as it's you don't have people fighting over it financially.
Yeah. I'm guessing it can get pretty nasty. I mean, you don't have to go into any of that, but I mean, you're not just a props collector though, Dan. Are you? You're a director and you're a creative person. What's your current project? What's your next project?
Yeah, working on a number of different things. A couple documentary series ideas, a game show series that we've got that we think is really fun. My partner Jason Henry and I, and then we'll see. We should be finding out soon whether or not we're going to get a season 2 of Prop Culture. Hopefully, we'll get a season 2. I think it's been accepted really well by social media. I think a lot of people really liked it. I'm very humbled and honored that people really dig it. But a show like that, like your Filmumentaries, I made it as much for myself as I made it for anybody else. Mm-hmm. I wanted something that I would be proud of that dealt with the subject that I hold near and dear to me, and not just the props, but movie making and the people that work on these things. So I think maybe that's why it connected to an audience. But yeah, that kind of thing. I'd done a feature film, a comedy, and a year and a half ago, co-wrote it, co-directed it, produced it, called Izzy Lion: The Unspun Truth. It's a scripted comedy. It's very funny. It's about the world of sign spinning, which people here in the United States are aware of. It's not so common internationally, but we're moving towards getting a distributor for that. So that's exciting. Hopefully we'll see that, if not in theaters with everything going on, hopefully we'll see that in on demand or one of the bigger streaming platforms soon. And I want to delve into scripted stuff. I've got a number of projects that I'm developing that science fiction, fantasy, that kind of thing. I want to do it all, man. I don't know if I have enough time, but I want to do it all. Hopefully I can. I want to do some of that stuff with you.
Yeah. Well, let's hope so. My fingers are firmly crossed. But you should be proud of that show, Dan, because, as I said before, there was always the danger that it would fall into the kind of scripted reality. Oh wow, look what we found in this guy's attic, or something like that. Or there was the potential that it would be purely about the money. Or
that was
something.
my concern too.
Yeah, but I think you guys found an absolutely perfect balance on that. And as I said, you made some films that I wasn't necessarily interested in come alive for me and made me watch them again, which is, I think, is a testament to the work that everybody put in on that show. Because I know that everybody worked their asses off. And
we did.
Do what you love is that thing, isn't it? Is that saying? And you do what you love, and
That's
it comes
right.
across. It really does come across.
Yeah, you can feel that energy. And if you enjoy it, hopefully people are going to see that and get excited as well. So, yeah, hopefully we get a season 2. Got a whole bunch of movies that I'm dying to do episodes on. Would love to do an episode on Dragon Slayer, which is one of my favorite films. Yes. Yeah. A lesser known Disney film and Paramount film co-production, and then Raiders of the Lost Ark. I mean, you know that movie pretty well. I'd love to dive into that, and there's just so much great stuff in the Disney and now Fox archive that we could do if we get the opportunity. So
yeah, well, I really hope you do.
Crossing my fingers.
I still think Dragon Slayer's got the best dragon in it of all the dragon movies.
Without a doubt. It's just it feels so real and it's so terrifying.
Did I see that in one of the auctions in the prop store thing, there was some Dragon Slayer stuff there?
There's some Dragon Slayer There's a prototype underskull, I think 2 prototype underskulls, armature pieces, and then there's a scale, a Vermithrax pejorative scale, and then some paperwork, which I might be bidding on some of that stuff. So don't bid on it.
I'll put this out after the auctions happened.
No.
Well, Dan, I really appreciate your time, and I always enjoy chatting to you. And yeah, I really do hope that we can continue to come up with ideas and get to work together. And yeah, fingers crossed it will happen.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Jamie. It's been great working with you. Thanks for having me on the podcast. Anytime you want me to come on, I'm not sure why, but I would be happy to do it for you. We got to help each other out. That's how we get moving in this industry. So
definitely.
Good talking to you, and we'll talk soon, all right?
Yeah, definitely. Cheers, Dan. Thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed listening to my chat with Dan Lanigan there, props collector. I always enjoy chatting to Dan. He's a good guy. And yeah, we've got some exciting stuff bubbling under at the moment. Hopefully that happens. If not, I can see Dan and I continuing to endeavour to come up with some projects for many years to come. He really is somebody who brings enthusiasm and passion to his work, and you'll totally see that when you watch Prop Culture. Next time, I'm speaking to 3 gentlemen who were brought together to build and puppeteer a giant intergalactic slug. I bet you can guess which one. I've spoken to Toby Philpott before, as well as Dave Barkley. I've not spoken to John Coppinger, who was the guy that supervised the build of Jabba. However, we recorded the podcast, it's already done, over 2 nights. One of the nights it was just Toby and John, and then a week later Dave was able to join us after having some major technical issues at his end. So I'm just in the process of editing that now, so hopefully I'll get that up at the end of August 2020. I appreciate your continued support. Really grateful to those of you that have donated via patreon.com. Even if it's just $1 per episode or $1 per month, that would be fantastic, because it all helps me find time to be able to do this whilst ignoring my real job. But also I just love doing it. So yeah, really appreciate all the support, all the help, and all the contributions that everybody's making. I've had over 1,000, I think it's 1,500 listens now of the first 5 episodes, which is fantastic. So please do share if you've enjoyed it, and do comment and do subscribe and everything else. And until next time, be good to each other, wear a mask, all that stuff. And yeah, I look forward to hearing some of your comments on this episode, and looking forward to getting the next one done. Bye for now.